This episode of the Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Leo Barrick. Leo Barrick is a tax valuation, cost segregation, modeling, and financial due diligence advisory firm focused on infrastructure, energy, renewables, and private equity. They are a carefully curated team of top talent within each of those core disciplines. Their sector focus and coordinated team allows them to move fast, stay efficient, and get deals done. Whether it's tax, structuring, due diligence, financial modeling, valuations, or post-deal support, Leo Barrick covers the full deal lifecycle. With decades of experience and awareness of commercial considerations that can make or break a deal, Leo Barrick is helping investors unlock value in some of the most important sectors of the future. To learn more, visit leobarrick.com. That's leoverwick.com. We'll also have it and on the notes of the podcast as well. Thank you again, Leo Barrick, for sponsoring this episode of the Solar Maverick Podcast.
The thing that really frustrates me is the breaching executed contracts and agreements. I don't ever remember the United States federal government intentionally breaching signed contracts. And so for our Solar for All clients who we've helped supported on hundreds of millions of dollars of programs, to see what's happened to those teams and programs that were explicitly delivering power at fixed discounts according to the IRA program requirements of 15 or 20% at a time when they need it most.
Hello and welcome to the Solar Maverick Podcast, where solar meets entrepreneurship and experience. I'm your host, Benoy Thanjan, so let's get into it.
Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. I'm really excited to have Daniel Dus on the podcast. He's the CEO of Cleantech Industry Resources and the founder of Solar Fight Night. And we're going to talk about a lot of interesting topics: development as a service, construction as a service, and one of the largest fundraisers in renewable energy at RE Plus in Las Vegas that I can't believe is coming up in 3 to 4 weeks. I've known Daniel for a long time and excited to have him on the Solar Maverick Podcast. Welcome, Daniel. It's great to have you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Benoy. I feel like what you're doing is more important than ever with all the market uncertainty. So really appreciate you out there storytelling, collecting everyone's thoughts. So thank you so much.
Oh, anytime. And I appreciate you making time during this, interesting time period. I feel like now we have to date everything. It's Monday, August 18th, 2025, just because obviously everything in the industry is changing. And obviously you have a great perspective because you are the original Solar Maverick. You've been in the industry for a very long time. You work with a lot of developers and IPPs. So you really bring a unique perspective of what's happening with US solar. Maybe to start it off, it would be great if you could tell our audience, or who we call Mavericks, about the amazing work that you're doing at Cleantech Industry Resources.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do it. For background, we spun out of what I had ranked as the largest global solar developer by third-party analysts, the Donnie Green Energy. So our core team helped establish and build the U.S. business there. They have broken ground, for example, on a single 30 gigawatt solar project in India. So that's the size of the entire combined US utility industry. That's the scale of what's happening there. And our team has in India worked on projects that are multiple times larger than exist in the United States of America today. So that's the core of the business and our team. We spun out with just a half dozen folks there 5 years ago. We're now at 125 globally and across 4 offices. What we built as a turnkey IPP business into a turnkey development as a service business. So we turned what we were doing internally for the world's largest global solar developer into a commoditized offering to the marketplace. So we broke down each of the unique activities necessary to advance an energy project, from site diligence to financial modeling to interconnection applications. You name it, we estimate about 95% of all of the activities necessary to advance a project from beginning through flowing electrons we've broken them down and commoditized them. So the industry's been talking about standardization since you and I got into it, like you said, kind of a long time ago now, for me, 18 years ago. We've actually done it. And it's game changing because it means fixed low prices that apply anywhere USA. It means zero bid time, right? We're the only organization on the planet that I know of that could tell you exactly how much we would charge for everything up to including turnkey systems engineering for a gigawatt solar asset or a gigawatt hour battery right now and stand behind that number anywhere USA. So you can think about the acceleration that brings to the table. We're often delivering work product before others have even bid the scope yet. So that's truly game changing in terms of efficiency, of course. So super excited to dig into and chat about any of the elements that we help commoditize or accelerate.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to hear. I know I told you during the pre-interview, there are other developers that I've spoken to that, have that work with you. And obviously, like, especially in these times too, if you're able to have like the expertise that you have, being able to turn it around really quickly, right? And then obviously at a lower cost than what a developer could do is really like game changing. You're right. I don't actually know any companies in the space that do what you do. And I was really excited too because I was looking on the website and you could actually have like dedicated staff as well from your team help. As you know, like development cycles are up and down and the work that comes in and out. So to have that flexibility, especially, the smaller mid-size developer who can't afford to have like a dedicated person.
Yeah, one of the most fundamental problems that we solve for, it's the one that I've butted my head against the wall on time and again running EPCs and developers, is project work is lumpy. Sometimes you're waiting for tariffs to be resolved, you're waiting for zoning approvals or financing approvals. And if you're carrying and you have staffed up internally for maximum bandwidth to address the maximum need, then in those valleys and you're carrying that expensive SG&A, it gets pretty dangerous pretty quickly. And then you have to start applying those costs to future projects, and then you're not competitive. It really becomes a challenging spiral, right? So by comparison, our clients can be hired up for their core based need and focus on their core competencies, and then rely on us as completely flexible bandwidth. So sometimes we hear from clients on 32 to 40 projects in a given month, and then we don't hear from them for 2 more months, and then we hear from them with another whole set of tasks, maybe completely unrelated. And that's fine. We have over 135 clients, and so our run rate monthly is very consistent. We actually specifically keep a significant portion of our team bandwidth on the bench so that we're ready and capable and prepared to address those urgent needs as they come in, because timing really is everything and time is money, especially in development. And so we pride ourselves on having the adequate amount of bandwidth to address these project needs as they flow through our sort of sausage making machine, if you would. That spans legal consulting services, engineering, procurement, estimation services, of course, development. It's all the value chains.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing to see, like, obviously, like, you pretty much could do everything soup to nuts, or as you said, the sausage maker, as far as, services. Can you talk about, like, obviously the big, beautiful bill got signed July 4th. Every developer is rushing to get their projects to be able to qualify for the ITC for this year. Like, how has that been? I'm assuming that things are extremely busy from your.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. For a series of reasons, we're busier than ever. We're continuing to add a new team member roughly every other business day, as well as a new client on average every 2 or 3 business days. And it's certainly due to the portfolio project acceleration. Many of our clients are rushing not only into procurement and safe harbor, but also into start of construction, which is, of course, the most secure way to guarantee the tax credit value. And so we are expediting a ton of engineering processes on projects across the country. We're operating in 48 states today, have over 5 gigawatts of late stage engineering projects in process. That's 30% engineering plus. and over 5 GWh of batteries as well. So a lot of acceleration, actually. Of course, sometimes the irony of an attempt to slow something down with deadlines is you ultimately accelerate it. And then we are certainly helping folks do more with less to help their development dollars go further. So for folks that are in capital preservation mode, we're still doing more for them as a low-cost leader. Our turnaround times on engineering package, for example, tend to be about half of industry averages. Our pricing tends to be 30% to 70% less for that type of work. So of course, that's very helpful when you're trying to do more fast.
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate you explaining obviously the speed of service and then obviously the cost differential, which is huge, especially during these times. And then I'm interested in learning too, like I was reading about construction as a service. Can you talk about like how that model works? Like you talked
Yeah,
about.
absolutely. So 90% of our clients come to us with unique tasks as they have them according to their bandwidth and internal capabilities and focus. And then about 10% come to us with a project site and they ask us to come back when electrons are flowing and we execute the entire process. All of the development, engineering, permitting, interconnection, etc., all the way through construction management and arrangement. So when we execute construction, we execute in several models. One is we're happy to arrange a third-party bankable fixed price EPC. That's the standard model, except that we will also descope them and RFP every component in the array, down to inches of copper conduit and wire, to make sure that there's a best resource approach to each project site. On average, we're saving folks 3 to 5% in that process by ensuring there's been a large global direct to OEM globally RFP process executed. We have over 60,000 vendors in our contact database for those processes. And then the second model is what I would call at cost solar. So we'll actually procure all of those materials directly on behalf of our clients at cost, no markups of any kind, and then RFP for mechanical, electrical, civil labor, and eliminate the general contractor's typical 18% margin and markup in overhead. And we'll construction manage the process to completion. Now, that has to be for certain clients. In fact, many of those clients are EPCs themselves, and so they know how to manage and execute with us and collaborate. We're also doing that for many real estate investors who are more accustomed to the development and build to suit model in real estate. What we're doing is more commonly been applied in real estate. IKEA doesn't develop its sites, for example, right? They rely on third parties like us to develop and execute. And so real estate investors really get our model, whereas it's new to renewables. And so that's a typical turnkey construction as a service client for us. But that's the benefit. We're often able to peel out 22 to 25% of the typical project cost in by changing the model there.
Yeah, I appreciate that you explaining that. And that's really interesting, like the value add and obviously going component to component, saving on that 18% sort of overhead margin that, construction companies put. And obviously, like the certain types of investors want development and construction and not the separate sort of thing that you see in solar, or at least a lot of
Right.
developers basically like to sell at NTP because the margins to take the COD might not be worth potential liability that they take. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Depending on their risk management approach, it could be a great model. And the complexities of the project and project site. There are a lot of really nice, flat, dry sites out there. It's perfect for those types of projects. So it's been great to make some projects hit investment returns that otherwise would not, to see them get done versus potentially get scrapped or shelved, right? That's where we get really excited.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, really, you're saying that you're able to make projects work that obviously wouldn't have worked. So you're proliferating more, renewable energy, which is great.
That's the goal, right? More projects faster. This is the goal for all
Yeah,
of us.
and then obviously with the big beautiful bill, they kept the ITC for energy storage to
Mm-hmm.
2023 at 30%. You talked about the pre-call that you were actually looking at a lot of energy storage. Like in New York City and Con Ed, obviously there's been a lot of different developers.
Yeah.
Can you talk about like what you're seeing in energy storage in the US and if there's certain states or whether it's primarily like standalone or is it solar plus storage? And it would be great.
Yeah, of course. So we are the engineer of record for a top three global best developer for a variety of their projects, from sales engineering into IFC engineering sets. And it's just been phenomenal to see the scale evolving, right? Even just a few years ago, it would have been rare to see a 100 megawatt hour battery. And now gigawatt hour batteries are commonplace. So that's exciting. Of course, many large utility assets we're engineering are now incorporating large battery storage systems. I would say throughout the south, southwest, southeast, more and more common to soak up those extra electrons from large scale solar assets, so paired projects. Of course, Texas, we're doing a ton of project work in battery storage in Texas. And then also on CNI projects, I would say the vast majority of folks at least want to model them financially. And then in some markets like New York State, they're working really well. So capacity payments are critical to most of the financings we've seen, although some financiers and investors have gotten more bullish on the merchant value of those assets. And given that with the OBBBA, we now do anticipate energy pricing to escalate by 20 to 30% plus over the next as little as 12 months. A lot more projects are going to pencil in the coming years than they have in the past, sadly, for the average ratepayer. But that's just the world that we live in. So, tremendous amount of both DG and large utility batteries at the gigawatt scale. I was just in New York last week and meeting with multiple clients who have large portfolios of New York BESS and New England BESS. So we see, of course, they're phenomenal tools for power quality, for arbitrage rate. And so we anticipate, especially with what we're working on data center side, we have a ton of data centers in process, from gigawatt scale microgrid supported data centers to national distributed data center plays, multiple clients across both fronts doing amazing things. And when you start to run those load scenarios on the grid, you start to see the strain, rapidly see the strain. And we model grids as if we are the system operator or balancing authority. We can put the entire grid into our operating software and see where restrictions are happening and where issues arise. And when you aim to as much as double the total load on the grid over the next decade, you rapidly see where pain points arise. And of course, BESS is going to be a huge portion of solving those constrictions. That's been exciting. Of course, ITC is in place, like you said, through 2032. So it's nice to have that runway. So we're helping a lot of traditional solar platforms become battery storage platforms. We offer all of our IP and market intelligence, et cetera, to help them transition. We lend them our engineering expertise, our technical expertise on how to assess sites for potential interconnection and bring that into turnkey interconnection processes and financial modeling. It's been great to give folks those tools to help diversify their business, especially right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think like obviously a lot of developers after the big beautiful bill are trying to figure out how to adjust their business model. And, obviously we're a developer and talking to a lot of developers. Everyone's looking into storage, obviously standalone solar plus storage. It's interesting because you mentioned a lot about New York City or New York and Massachusetts, really, right? You have like a VETR program, the SMART program. See more like IPPs. It sounds like they're willing to take more risk than maybe before with capacity payments and then the higher energy prices versus like having like a long-term sort of fixed pricing, which obviously is
Yeah, we certainly see the vast majority of best projects moving forward based on the financing and economics of long-term revenue, contracted revenue. But we have seen some allowance for merchant value over time, primarily supporting the debt, the project debt. That's where it really counts. So it's still limited, but we've definitely seen some IPPs getting more aggressive. And I think we'll see more project acquisitions that are based on some portion of ancillary services revenue. That I do hope will be a significant trend here the rest of this year.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you explaining. And then one of the other things too, I think, just to read, we're also seeing obviously lithium ion battery prices going down substantially.
Mm.
Like we kind of saw in solar, we're still seeing in solar. Can you talk about like what I know that a lot of developers and IPPs listen to the podcast, like what is like sort of
Yeah.
the trend with lithium ion pricing?
Yeah. One of my favorite trends is how OEMs, if you get their pricing sheet over the past years, they project an upward pricing trend. And of course, every year we've seen a downward pricing trend. That's always interesting. And one of the learnings we help bring to our clients when they're modeling projects that break ground in the future, of course, the most significant limitation right now is yet unknown, and that is our FIAC safe harbor requirements. And so we'll see how pricing does post FIAC safe harbor guidance and what that looks like. Certainly top of mind for everyone. Although we do have a significant portion of developers and IPPs who are bullish regardless of where this comes out, especially when you're looking at projects that are out 3 or 4 years as the US supply chain matures. But it will have an impact on our equipment pricing that we know for sure it will. The question is by how much, right?
For sure. So yeah, with FIAC, if people are not familiar, it's foreign entity of concern. Really, the big country in that is China, and really most of our battery is coming from China. Like, I don't know. I know this is probably a question that's pretty hard to answer, but how quickly do you think we could start doing everything really with the production of the battery here in the US?
Yeah. And we've seen some really phenomenal battery factories being commissioned and announced here in the US, primarily from the IRA's incentives. And certain elements can be ramped up rapidly, cell assembly, etc. However, if FIAC is going back into anode cathode materials, I think the statistic is somewhere around 85% of all anode cathode materials in the world are made in China. So that's a challenge and it's much harder to ramp up. And we do see, of course, a tremendous amount of great new technology evolution there that will hopefully reduce the amount of material and or identify and deploy alternative materials. So hopefully they will accelerate.
Yeah, definitely. That's really helpful, Daniel. And then the other thing that I was also noticing is that there are battery companies that are using different technology than lithium ion. Is that something that you're also seeing as well?
Yeah, flow state and other batteries. Yes, more limited applications still in a more constricted supply chain, but certainly more and more interest. I think we're seeing that more on the development side, earlier stage project development and deployment. So something to keep an eye on, but I think probably 2027 forward and may well be thoroughly supported by the FIAC guidance. We may see acceleration there.
Definitely appreciate you explaining that. And then, clean tech industry resources, which use the abbreviation CIR if people are not familiar. I know you mentioned this before, has over 1 billion in projects completed and 9.8 billion, wow, in process, which is amazing. I mean, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from scaling projects at this level?
Yeah, so again, our team has unique experience in the mega scale project universe. And so things like reactive power, load flow, of course, of grid integration and controls are all technically the most challenging elements of those projects. I think more holistically in looking at the deployments that we have worked on and are working on, it's the interface of the value chains, right? It's the interface of legal and engineering. It's the interface of engineering and finance. It's the interface of procurement and legal and finance. And those are the areas where we have spent a tremendous amount of time in facilitating and accelerating the workflows and bringing them forward in the development process. So, yeah, including our AI automation team, they're spending a tremendous amount of time making sure that all of our various software tools. I think we're headed to 25 different enterprise level software tools across the industry, all the way from upfront Zoom info integration to Procore at the back end and construction management and everything in between. And it's at those interfaces where we've seen issues and challenges most often happen historically and within our clients' projects, and where we see them sort of struggle to put those pieces together. And so we are, and have been for a long time, highly focused on applying multidisciplinary bandwidth. So just as an example, even if we have an engineering only engagement, we put a lawyer on that team. We put a developer on that team so that they can capture the impacts of zoning agreements or PPAs on the project design. They can capture those areas of interface. So I think that's where we've had probably the bulk of our learnings over time and seen the bulk of issues and help resolve and solve the bulk of issues. And also just based on the scale, the highly technical elements are really fascinating. When you get into reactive power at the gigawatt hour scale, you get into some areas that are basically theoretical at some point, right, in terms of the science. So it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually really interesting to hear, like the value add and the complexity, right? That you talk about. And you need like a lawyer in different disciplines, right? Because it's so complicated. That's
Yeah.
a real value in learning. And obviously, like I'm sure it helps differentiate too. And also too, like a lot of especially developers don't have that sophistication that you're talking about.
Yeah, and no small team really could. It does take a tremendous amount of bandwidth to ensure you have all those specializations on a team and that your team is capable of operating all the specialized software tools that have been built and are at this point very, very good and sophisticated. And so, yeah, do you necessarily want to have 100+ people to capture all of these unique and highly specialized issues that arise? It depends on our clients' models. But and even if you just look at my background, Benoy, which you've seen over the years, right? I started off as CFO at Marfer and then moved into the COO role, overseeing engineering and operations, and then took a CSO role overseeing sales and business development at Safari Energy before taking a CDO role at Dynamic, now under Pattern. So very intentionally, I had teams of people that were much better than me at each of those specializations reporting up to me. So selfishly, I got to learn from all of them. I am a microcosmic example of the importance of being able to execute across the value chains efficiently. So you're not missing the interface of and interrelatedness of those issues. It's definitely where we spend a ton of time.
Oh, for sure. And that's actually great too, with explaining your background. And then you're able to see the issues more than anyone else because you've done so many different types of roles at a senior level position. So you have an appreciation of the things that impede a project. And then you're basically taking that and bringing the team together and having those resources available for, for developers who don't have that in-house, right? And
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone asks me what the greatest value I bring to the table is, it's all the mistakes I made from like 2006 to 2010, 11. Like that was where, I got the scar tissue so our clients don't have to. And then the other piece is having managed highly specialized teams across all the verticals and all of the issues and biggest problems and challenges, of course, bubbling up to my desk over the span of 18 years across all value chains. That's certainly it. And all of that thanks to all of those phenomenal teams that I had the pleasure and honor of working with. So that's the core scar tissue.
yeah, definitely. I'm sure it's scar tissue, but it's value today. When I think about it, now that I'm thinking about your background, like, there's not really many people who have that experience. You know what I mean? Over 18 years in the different roles that you had.
Yeah, usually folks they'll be a CFO in the space, right, for the run and be extremely, extremely good at that. But I very intentionally wanted exposure, but very deep exposure across all the verticals before I took the president CEO type role, right? That was an intentional progression for selfishly for learning opportunity.
I think it's really smart to do that because a lot of people don't do that. Obviously, we have a lot of listeners too who are new to the industry. I kind of did the same thing too, where it was taking different roles and within the renewable energy space and been on different sides of the transaction. I worked for, private equity fund, EPC, large resident in different roles. So in Rex and project finance and development. So that's interesting to kind of hear that perspective because I think people just tend to stay in the same role and then you don't see things. When I talk to a developer, I could have a lot better conversation because I've done actual development, even though my background's in finance versus someone who's just done, finance, hasn't done development. Because then you start
Yeah.
seeing the missing layers too. And then obviously,
Yeah.
different law firms and legal. I mean, part of me feels like I'm a lawyer because I'm just reading
Right.
documents and providing business points and
Yeah. I call us a lawyer often. Right? Like if you look at a typical EPC or MIP or PPA, 2/3 of it is often technical. And so then you have lawyers managing engineers and packaging their work to some degree. To me, it was like, I would really rather have one neck to wring on this document, like these very critical documents. Certainly agree. And I think it's a big part of the value add that we've created. And to make it tangible, the very first thing when I wanted to get into solar finance and project finance, the very first thing I did, however, was I found a project that was in construction, which was hard to do back in 2006. And I found out who the EPC was and got in touch with them. And I was like, hey, I would like to come and help you install this project. I want to carry inverters around. I want to carry panels around. And they're like, no, we're good. Like, we have our crew. Thanks for calling, though. I was like, no, you don't, like, for free. I don't want to get paid. I want the experience. And I spent a week carrying panels around and hanging inverters. And that was the best way to accelerate my knowledge so that I could talk to Wall Street about the asset class that I could think of, right? Like that was,
oh yeah.
but probably not folks' first thought usually when they look to get into project finance, go do some manual labor, right?
It's interesting to me you mentioned this because we were talking about this earlier. Like, obviously, your Solar Fight Night raised money last year for Let's Share the Sun Foundation, which is
Awesome.
both solar and storage for people who have 24-hour medical needs in Puerto Rico. I was with them in March installing solar on 6 residential homes. What surprised me, all professionals in the solar industry, that most of the people have never actually been or even been involved in installation. So they were so excited and they felt like they learned a lot because they're actually seeing what's actually happening. And I think like,
Yes.
forgot that how like that's actually, I go on a lot of roofs looking at large rooftop solar land sites. I forget that there is a part of the industry that doesn't actually go onto the site or experience that.
Yeah. Even engineers, right? Even many industry engineers that I've hired into organizations never set foot on a site. It's kind of an imperative, right? Especially for some of these roles. And it's surprising, but there's little that can beat the exposure of putting boots on the dirt or the roof.
Oh, the roof, yeah, for sure. With over 130 clients across the value chain, like what are the industry trends that you're seeing in the US solar industry?
Yeah, it's an interesting and timely question, of course, because it's changed so dramatically the past months. And we've seen an interesting breakdown. So we have many clients who are 2 or 3 ex, SunEd guys raised $20 million type that know enough not to build a massive internal team and all that SG&A. They're focusing on the client, the strategy, their core competencies, and then using us for everything else all the way to the largest IPPs operating in energy who are using us based on either need for additional bandwidth. They might be able to do all of what we do internally, but they have more than they can take on. So they use us as a bandwidth relief valve or for unique activities and actions based on what they don't have internal core competencies on. So it really runs the game and everything in between across developers, EPCs, industry focused financiers. And a few really strong trends. One is global multinationals operating in the US space are backing off big time, right? And we've seen a lot of the public announcements about this, and they can invest anywhere they want to, right? They can invest in Asia, Europe, South America. And I think they're looking at the United States and kind of throwing up their hands, not necessarily walking away, but just taking the foot off the accelerator. And that's really sad to see, right? And unfortunate for many of those teams and those pipelines. And then we are also seeing a lot of our best capitalized partners doubling down, right? They, from their perspective and our perspective, the next 12 to 18 months might be the best time to enter into projects and platforms that we see ever. And so they're really all systems go. We're helping them underwrite deals, acquire deals quickly, step into deals at midstream because we can provide the turnkey development to help them fill in the gaps from any acquisition. So they don't just have to buy NTP ready assets. They can step in at mid stage or even earlier, where really anywhere in the development process. And we can price the remaining development activity up front for the first time because we've commoditized it all. So it's game changing the finance community. So a lot of those clients, then certainly a large segment of undercapitalized developers, local and smaller developers who are scrambling, right? Scrambling for safe harbor strategies, scrambling to exit projects. And we support and help them by getting their data rooms ready for transaction, getting projects ready for financing if they're late stage, and trying to fill the gaps to help accelerate. So those are just some of the many and diverse trends that we're seeing. Certainly a shift to battery storage development, engineering, and execution that we talked about. Massive macro trend too. So it's some good news and some sad news, right?
Yeah, definitely. The solar roller coaster continues. Obviously, other countries probably, when you're looking on a global perspective, might be better right now, just considering obviously the big, beautiful bill. Also, too, I don't know if you read the language related to the executive order. It was pretty harsh about the solar and wind industry. I think that also is like spooked
Yeah.
people as well. That executive order was June 7th, I think. Sorry, July 7th. Yeah, and then obviously we just got the safe harboring rules on Friday and we're waiting for FIAC. I know you talked about the big beautiful bill too. We spoke about, is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding the big beautiful bill?
The thing that really frustrates me is the breaching executed contracts and agreements. I don't ever remember the United States federal government intentionally breaching signed contracts. And so for our Solar for All clients who we've helped supported on tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of programs, to see what's happened to those teams and programs that were explicitly delivering power at fixed discounts according to the IRA program requirements of 15 or 20% at a time when they need it most, when now your local mom and pop shops and homeowners are competing against Amazon Web Services, Facebook, Google, and OpenAI for electrons to power their homes, right? One of those groups is at a distinct disadvantage in terms of being able to write checks for power. And so it was really, really personally disappointing to see both the United States walk away from helping deliver the lowest cost power to the people most in need of getting that power and reducing their living costs, as well as breaching signed and delivered contracts and agreements. Because if you fast forward that, and if you look forward, at what point can counterparties and financiers then take the US federal government at its word again, right? These are the same financiers. They're the same PE funds, pension funds, and other investors that any administration is going to want supporting their initiatives. But how can they then be trusted if the contract law itself is breached? That's really, I think, the most concerning thing to me right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point. I mean, it creates a bad precedent when you're breaking contracts, and obviously these financiers will look at the US differently when it comes to doing business, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Did you want to hear something petrifying and nerve-wracking that I found out in this process is the United States federal government cannot be assessed damages for misconduct, breach of contract, and I think any issue under the law without an express act by Congress. So they could be found guilty of and have liability for actual damages. Someone spends $100, they'll get that $100 through a litigation process if they can afford one, but there won't be any. Usually, if you or I breach our contracts, we could be held liable for 2 or 3 or 4x that breach as damages to disincentivize that kind of behavior, right? Any private business, if you could just go ahead and terminate that contract right before your funds became due and see if you could get a better deal out of your counterparty, because the litigation process is so slow and expensive, that would be a pretty bad outcome for the rule of law and contract law anywhere. So a fascinating and somewhat concerning fact. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had no idea that is like concerning for sure. And I sharing that.
Wild, right?
It is wild. We talked a little bit about it, but it would be great if you could tell us about Solar Fight Night that's coming up in what, 3.5 or 3. It's
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I know you spend a lot
In
of
a
time.
day. I know. I spend an inordinate amount of time organizing Fight Night, and it is often my favorite night of the year because you go through the year reading all of these headlines about the terrible stuff we do, the stupid stuff we do as a species, and it can grind you down, right? Like it can definitely take you down. And Fight Night, by contrast, is a group of people that are so passionate about doing the right thing. And so it really gives me renewed energy and hope for the year every year, catching up with our people. So love Fight Night. Fight Night was for a decade an underground, invite only event of senior executive founders, CEOs, and senior execs, specifically with the intention of helping people make the connections that got projects done and accelerated projects and platforms. I'll never forget the first or second Fight Night. I had signed a 100 kilowatt project with the city of Santa Monica, which was massive at the time. And everyone was like, oh my God, like, how are you going to possibly get that built? So that's this. And I think there's probably a dozen folks in the room. And now we'll have over 3,000 people attend in Las Vegas. I've heard it referred to as the Met Gala of renewable energy events. And we hope to raise over $600,000 on event costs of around, call it $400K, and then to contribute $200,000 to renewable focused nonprofits. And this year we have already launched an anti-misinformation campaign, which I'm very excited about. This stems out of research I did following the passing of the OBBBA, because I think we were all pretty shocked that there was not a voice of reason in the Congress or Senate, or at least that had the forethought to stand up and take action. I guess plenty of them said afterwards, oh, I didn't know I voted for that. Or they said, can you, Senate, change the bill I just voted for? Maybe there's a lot of buyer's remorse there, but at the end of the day, they voted for and passed this bill, which was absolutely mind-numbingly bad for their constituents, their ratepayers, which is all of us. We all pay utility bills. And so I did a bunch of research and I logged into Truth Social, which of course I had never done before, just to try to understand like what is going on, like what are people saying, and seeing the amount of misinformation and the staggering absolute ridiculousness of it. And they're not seeing that there was not any response or voice of reason in some of these threads. It really set the stage for me to understand how this bill got passed. And it set the stage for me to want to do something about it, right? And so we are cataloging all of the standard misinformation points and then referenced responses to those so folks can rapidly have a resource to go draw those responses and post them if they like. We're ramping up a team of folks to go out and respond to all these crazy comments. We registered cleantechfactcheck.org. We're going to register accounts in that name. We're going to power those accounts with AI automation and analytics and also a team. And we're also going to catalog all of the industry stories and all the podcasts that reference facts and true life stories that are the true counter medicine to this misinformation that we're seeing proliferate. So, for example, if you find someone from Toledo, Ohio, who makes a crazy comment or post, we want folks to be able to go and find a neighbor, someone down the road that says, hey, this is the best investment I've ever put on my roof, right? Like, which is what I would say about my home solar array. It's the best money I've spent on my home. And so, we really want to make this accessible and we want to get the word out. So that is the new Solar Fight Night initiative. We're going to double down on that this year. We're partnered with some amazing organization. This year, we're supporting Run on Climate. Run on Climate is identifying mayoral candidates, county government candidates, and not in New York City, but rural America, smaller towns and cities across the country that have a climate focus, and they're giving them not only support in their electoral process, but also all of the tools and resources for them to enact pro-climate policies, because that's actually where the fight's happening on project approvals across the country. So huge fan of Run on Climate, what they're doing. We're going to support them and team with them on this dramatic amount of misinformation we're seeing across the country.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is really important. I appreciate you doing that. Obviously, we've been impacted by this misinformation, and it's important to basically provide the correct facts for the public to make the right decisions and our elected officials as well and the constituents. So I really appreciate you doing that because I haven't heard of anyone doing it. And I know through the podcast, I'm trying to educate people, but I think we need something like what you're talking about. Just quickly, one last question. What advice would you to young professionals looking to enter the renewable energy space today?
AI. There's a reason why one of our most recent interns from the first Rochester Institute of Technology's Masters of AI cohort, and it's because what she's capable of doing is mind-numbing, and what the folks on our AI automation team are doing is mind-numbing, and it's across the value chain. It's in every vertical. It's in marketing, content creation. It's in engineering. It's in development. It's in procurement, etc. So I would say if you're a young professional, make sure that you are an AI-powered young professional and that you are able to rapidly understand the value of those tools and to deploy those tools. That is a macro trend that's really only just starting to be felt. We have some internal AI tools that have reduced workflow times by 90% in development. So we have internal tools that will automatically scrape hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of databases, public and internal, to accelerate project analysis. We still need humans to review, fact check, optimize, and confirm those findings, but it certainly sets the stage in a way that has never been possible before. So we still really like humans and we are bullish on humans, but we are also very bullish on AI-powered humans and humans leveraging those automation tools. So that's definitely a recommendation.
Yeah, that's great advice. This has been an amazing interview, Dan. I feel like we could talk for hours. I appreciate
Thanks so much.
Like if our audience wants to learn more about you, CIR or Solar Fight Night, how can they do that?
I always recommend to folks, if you want to understand what CIR is doing, just go to our website and go to our product page. It's cleantechir.com. The product page has all of those commoditized products based on system size and technology. It really immediately communicates the depth and breadth of what we've accomplished, inclusive of all scoping and scopes. So that's an amazing tool and resource to set the stage. Of course, reach out to me personally on LinkedIn. And Solar Fight Night, we launched our own website to avoid what was last year $19,000 of Eventbrite fees. So we are at solarfightnight.org, and we'll continue to, where we also have databased every renewable nonprofit that we found globally, so folks can rapidly access local and national and international nonprofits. So yeah, please connect. Let's collaborate. Let's get more done faster.
Yeah, definitely. This has been an amazing interview. We'll have it on the notes of the podcast. I will see you down in person at the Solar Fight Night in 3.5 weeks. And thank you
Awesome.
for all the great work that you're doing. And I'm excited for the future and keep up the great work. Thank you again.
Awesome. Benoy, keep getting the word out. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Solar Maverick Podcast. The Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Renew Energy. We're a solar development and consulting firm. If you believe that this podcast is adding value to you, please give us a 5-star review and share with those that you think could benefit from this information. Please email all questions, suggestions, and feedback to info@renewenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. The Solar Maverick Podcast is produced by Podcast Laundry and executive produced by Benoy Thanjan and Kevin Y. Brown.